This lesson is going to be providing you examples of how to analyze a poem, how to approach the poem. What are some of the best ways to try to pull the meaning out of it? And there is meaning deliberately put in there. The poets work very hard to condense and concentrate these thoughts in there. And as E. Cummings once said, if you don't have to work hard at it, the poem wasn't worth it. So, meaning that you as the reader should have to work to try to understand what's really going on in there. And the poets also realize that when you do read these poems, you're going to be bringing your own experiences to it, your own thoughts. And so they're going to become uniquely your own interpretations. So these poems are going to mean different things to different people. So if you ever walk up to a poet and say, "What does this poem mean?" they're going to laugh at you. They might tell you what they thought when they were writing it, but they still want to know what you thought when you read it. Now, we're going to start off with Emily Dickinson and Wild Nights, Wild Nights. Now, normally I would do this as a class discussion, and I still haven't quite figured out the best way to approach that as an online course. Maybe we should do this as like a Zoom or a Teams meeting, or maybe a discussion board, but we'll work on that as we go along. Probably, but next time I teach this, I'll have it down. Emily Dickinson. She was a very interesting person. Her father was, well, he wasn't exactly in charge. He was on the board and worked very closely with Amherst and several colleges up in Massachusetts. And he was a very important man. He was also going on the board of several churches. Very wealthy man. Very used to having his influence be heard, listened to, and obeyed. And he sort of ran his family that way. Emily Dickinson, when she was still young, had to kind of give up on her dreams. She wanted to go to college and she wanted to do all sorts of things, but her mother took ill. And so Emily sort of took over caring for her mother. Now, she did spend 1 year at Amherst. But most of Emily's, or I should say Dickinson, we don't refer to people by their first name, by the way, when you're writing. We always refer to them by their last name. So Dickinson spent most of her life in her home. She didn't wander much. She didn't get to go out. And she got most of her education at home. Now, she was fortunate because her father was so well educated and knew so many important people. They used to come to visit at the house, and so she got to meet some of the greatest minds in the nation at that time. Some of the best poets, some of the best writers, best scientists, all sorts of foremost thinkers would come by to visit and have dinner with them. There is this story that she was a hermit and she hated to go out, and it's not true. Later in life, as she got older, she got more that way, but it wasn't because she was scared to be out in the public or around other people. She just got set in her ways. Now, one of the problems with poor Miss Dickinson was that her father never felt that any men were good enough for her. And so she had a vivid fantasy life about sex. She did have a boyfriend when she was younger, and her father broke that up because he came from a middle-class family and he wasn't good enough for her. He was only in it for the money and all that sort of thing. Later in life, I think after her father died, she had a love affair with a scholar, an older man, who would come and visit from time to time, but he didn't stay. There was no hope of marriage. And so she spent a lot of time, fascinating about, dreaming about what her life might be like if she had a constant companion. So this poem here is very clearly a sex poem. This is her fantasizing. Oh, what would it be like if I had a man in bed with me on a regular basis? Oh, how great it would be. So, this is not uncommon. Poets write about what they feel, what their important feelings are, and a lot of them do write love poems, and some of those love poems get a little wild. This is one of the wilder ones. So now I'm going to shut up and actually read the poem to you. Wild nights, were I with thee, wild nights should be our luxury. Futile the winds to a hardened port, done with the compass, done with the chart, Rowing in Eden, ah, but the sea, might I but moor tonight in thee. Now her poems are typically short, to the point, and she has packed a lot of meaning in these 12 lines. So what you have to do is you literally almost have to go word for word through some of these poems. This particular one is one of those kind of poems. Wild nights. Notice she capitalizes both words. Wild, night. She wants you to see that this is important. She wants to have wild nights. Exclamation point. And she repeats it with wild nights. Exclamation point. Oh, yes, I want wild nights. Wild nights. And then she takes it to the next step. Were I with thee? Wild nights should be our luxury. Now, what is luxury? It's perfect comfort. It's everything you dreamed of, and you don't have to work for it. It just comes naturally. We can relax and truly enjoy these wild nights. There's no price to pay, no father to look down on us. Now she switches theme a little bit here with the next stanza. This is something that's typical with poets. Each stanza is like a paragraph, will have its own independent thought. So the next one she says, futile the winds to a heart in port, done with the compass, done with the chart. Wait a minute, what does this have to do with wild nights? Winds, port, compass, chart. Why is she speaking these words? That all has to do with a ship. You know, you need winds to drive yours, because we didn't have steamboats yet, or they were just coming around. So you need sails, you need winds to move your ship. And a ship in port means it's moored. It's set at the pier. It's not going anywhere. So if it's in port, it doesn't need a compass to figure out where it's going. It doesn't need to look at a chart or a map to see, you know, if they're heading correctly. So what is she talking about here? So if it's futile to have winds, there's no need. If you're in port, you don't need a compass, you don't need a chart. She says the heart is in port. Oh, you're here with me is what she's saying. If you're here with me. So we're going back still, we're developing that theme from the first stanza. To a heart in port, your heart is here. It's not going anywhere. We're both together in one place. So we don't care what the wind does. We don't need a compass. We don't need a chart, because we're not going anywhere. Now, we're combining these two ideas in the third stanza. And understand the last two lines usually are the main idea, the most important thought the poet's trying to get across. Okay, rowing in Eden. I hope you all know what Eden is by now. So rowing, we're back to the ship theme here. Ah, the sea. Now, sea is often referred to in feminine terms. Sea can mean a lot of things here, but we get this impression that she's talking almost about, you know, you think about when you're at sea, you're in a boat, there's a rhythmic movement. So since they're in port, but she's dreaming about the sea, we're talking about full out sex here. We're getting that boom, boom, the wave moving, the ship rolling kind of feeling. And this is where it gets a little tricky. Might I but moor tonight in thee. She's a woman. Women don't moor. Moor is literally the ship pulling into port. So you have two piers set up and the ship pulls in between the two piers. She's not the ship, she's the water between the two piers. The ship goes in. Okay. Dickinson frequently took the masculine role when she was talking about sex. So it's a little weird when you read this. Might I but moor tonight in thee. Wait, she doesn't go in, he goes in. So it's, yeah. But again, those are her fantasies and she's welcome to them. Okay. Next. The Charge of the Light Brigade. I chose this poem because I want you to see a little bit about how rhythm works, about how meter can build a feeling about a poem. Now, The Charge of the Light Brigade is based on an actual event. Alfred Lord Tennyson was commemorating a tragedy, a horrible thing that happened in a war. It was the Battle of Balaclava on October 25th, 1854. And this was during the, let's see, where is it? The Crimean War, which was pretty much the British versus the Russians. And they were set up basically on two different hills. The Russians were on one hill, the British were on another hill, and they were firing cannons at each other, and they had their cavalry. Cavalry are the mounted soldiers, the ones who have horses. Okay. Now, what happens is Lord Raglan, who was the commander of the British forces, made a horrible mistake. He's looking at the Russians, and he sees that they are reloading their cannons. So he wants his troops to fire their cannons, which are already set to go. So what he says is, he just shouts this command, "Charge the cannons!" which means light the fuses. Unfortunately, what's the command for the cavalry to move? Is charge. You say charge, the cavalry goes. He didn't think about that. He said, "Charge the cannons!" So the cavalry took off and charged down into the valley, up the hill, to try to take out those cannons, and they were massacred because the Russians were ready to fire. So they started just loading their cannons, boom, boom, their guns were firing. They were picking off these guys right and left. Very few of them made it back to the British hill. A terrible thing, and this is something to think about in your use of language. You've got to be very precise, because it's very easy to misinterpret what somebody says. Here is the actual poem. And listen to it and see what kind of feeling you get as you're listening to this. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade, charge for the guns, he said. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Forward the light brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not though the soldier knew someone had blundered. Theirs not to make reply, theirs not to reason why, theirs but to do and die. Into the valley of death rode the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon in front of them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there, charging an army while all the world wondered, plunged in the battery smoke, right through the line they broke, Cossack and Russian, reeled from the sabre stroke, shattered and sundered, and when they rode back, but not the 600. Cannon to right of them, cannon to left of them, cannon behind them, volleyed and thundered, stormed at with shot and shell, while horse and hero fell. They that had fought so well, came through the jaws of death, back from the mouth of hell, all that was left of them left of 600. When can their glory fade? Oh, the wild charge they made! All the world wondered. Honor the charge they made, honor the light brigade, noble 600. Now, when you're listening to this, you're of course paying attention to the words. You're hearing the story that's being told. But underneath of it, the rhyme and the rhythm, the meter, the choice of syllables, how the number of syllables per line is creating a feeling. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward, all in the valley of death rode the 600. You should get the feeling almost of horse beats. Half a league, half a league, half a league onward. Jump-a-da-dump-a-da-dump-a-da. And if you're not getting that, maybe you're getting the feeling of explosions. Stormed at with shot and shell, boldly they rode and well, into the jaws of death, into the mouth of hell rode the 600. Flashed all their sabres bare, flashed as they turned in air, sabering the gunners there. You should get this feeling like you're in the battle. This is a masterpiece of getting that kind of feeling across to you, not through the actual words, but through the sound. And the only way you get that is if you read the poem out loud. Poems were meant to be heard. They were not meant to be read silently. They're like songs, like I've said from the beginning. They are music just without instruments. You really need to hear them, so you should always read your poems out loud. Now, just for fun, I want to share this little piece with you. Back in the day when my parents were going through school, you had to memorize poems. You had to memorize parts of Shakespeare. What good does it do? It proves that you can memorize. It helps you discuss things at cocktail parties, and maybe you can win at Jeopardy. But other than that, they eventually got rid of it because it wasn't really accomplishing anything. So this is like a little example of what my parents used to have to go through in school.
Now, children, who knows today's recitation real well?
Real well? Oh, gosh.
Do you want to recite, Alfalfa?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, go right ahead.
Now you're going to hear some real talking. The charge of the light brigade. Half a leg, half a leg, half a leg, onward. In the valley of death rode the 600, forward to the light brigade. Charge for the guns, he said. In the valley of death rode the 600.
Spanky, don't interrupt.
Thank you, teacher.
Continue, Alfalfa.
For the light brigade. Was there a man dismayed? Not all the soldiers knew someone had blundered. There's not to make reply, there's not to reason why. There's but to do and die. In the valley of death rode the 600. Cannons to the left of me. Cannons on the right of me. Cannons in front of me. Valley then thunder.
There's the Little Rascals for you. Little bit of humor as we go through this. Now let me get this out of here so it's not going to go off again. Okay, so there you go. Little humor as we go forward. E.E. Cummings. You're going to have a little bit more experience with him later, but I want you to see this. E.E. Cummings liked to break all the rules. He liked to play games. So notice he doesn't have capital letters, except in very rare places. He doesn't like to follow the rules of punctuation, of proper sentence structure. So he wants you to figure out where to stop and start a sentence. Where do you think it's important to pause? If he's included some punctuation, then he really, really wants you to pause there. This particular poem is like a nursery rhyme. It has a real sing-song feel to it at first. And then he sort of wanders because he's trying to get a message across with this. And it's a fairly simple message. Don't get too hung up thinking, oh my gosh, it's like the origin of the universe here. No. Just think about it as we go through. What is he trying to tell us? Maggie and Millie and Molly and May went down to the beach to play one day. And Maggie discovered a shell that sang so sweetly she couldn't remember her troubles. And Millie befriended a stranded star whose rays 5 languid fingers were. And Molly was chased by a horrible thing which raced sideways while blowing bubbles. And May came home with a smooth round stone, as small as a world and as large as a loan. For whatever we lose, like a you or a me, it's always ourselves we find in the sea. Now, this was just a fun poem. It's nothing super deep, no world-shattering concepts here. But Cummings does a lot of interesting things. He uses a lot of different methods. First of all, he starts us off with alliteration. Molly and Millie and Maggie and May, and I just messed that up. Maggie and Millie and Molly and May. It's giving us sort of a sound. It's giving us that storybook kind of feel, that nursery rhyme kind of feel. It's so nice and bouncy and happy, and they went down to the beach to play one day. It's all so nice. And the fact that he puts to play one day in there in parentheses, anything you find in parentheses, it's not important. You can take it out and still get the meaning. But he wants to be sure that you understand that it's just for one day. Okay. Now, mainly he puts it in there for the rhyme scheme, just to make sure that we are getting that bouncy feeling. We're getting that rhyme. It sounds so sweet and innocent. Now, before we go any further, remember what I said earlier. If you want to find the meaning of the poem, look at the last two lines. For whatever we lose, like a you or a me, it's always ourselves we find in the sea. So, think about that. In each of these stanzas, the girls find something. So the thing that they find, it's always ourselves we find in the sea. That thing that they find in the sea represents them. It's symbolic of who they are. It's a metaphor. Okay? So Millie, I always do that. Maggie and Millie and Molly and May went down to the beach to play one day, and Maggie discovered a shell that sang so sweetly she couldn't remember her troubles, and already he's broken the rhyme scheme. Already he's changed the meter. There's a different number of syllables in those two lines. The second line is longer, and the meter is different. The repetition of stressed syllables is different. He's stretching it out. And Maggie discovered a shell that sang is still following the same meter as the first two lines. But so sweetly she couldn't remember her troubles is all broken up. You can't get a bouncy feel here anymore. In fact, you're not really getting much of a rhythm at all. He wants that. He wants you to feel broken up a bit. So what's happened? She's discovered a seashell. She's put it up to her ear like kids like to do. And of course all you hear is the sound basically bouncing around inside the shell. But people say you can hear the sea in the shell. In Maggie's case, that shell, the music inside that shell was so beautiful, she forgets her troubles. And she's just wandering on the beach. It's so sweet. She's losing herself in the shell. So we get this feeling of this disruption of the other song. She's lost from the outside world now. So sweetly she couldn't remember her troubles. And now we bounce to the next set of lines. Millie befriended a stranded star. We're back to the original rhythm again. And it sort of rhymes. Whose raised 5 languid fingers were. Whoa, okay. Again, the meter is broken up by languid fingers. It doesn't fit. And were and star don't exactly rhyme. These two lines don't seem to work, do they? They seem like they're trying, but they're just not getting there. And part of that is, if you look up what languid means, it means lazy, like a blob that you're just literally melting into the cushion, into your mattress. You have given up you've surrendered to sleep, and you just, I'm not moving. And so, a stranded star with 5 fingers is a starfish. So she's picked up a starfish and it's just drooping in her hands. And it's like her, she's just real lazy. She doesn't really do much. Then we get to Molly. Molly was chased by a horrible thing. We traced sideways while blowing bubbles. Boy, that line is really different. It's almost a horrible line. Blowing bubbles. You almost get a feeling for, what is this thing going on? And it's racing sideways. I kind of think it's a crab, because crabs move sideways. But, okay, so now we're getting a start. You can see her in the picture down here running. So the artist wasn't really sure what the horrible thing was, so it made her way off in the distance so you can't see it. But, so it's a horrible thing, racing sideways, and she's running from it because she's evidently a bit of a horrible thing herself. And May came home with a smooth round stone, as small as a world and as large as a loon. Well, our rhyme scheme has been reestablished, and so has the meter. Except it's not quite as bouncy, it's a little smoother. May came home with a smooth round stone. We have some internal rhyme going here. As small as a world and as large as a loan. And we've got a lot of O sounds going here. Home, smooth, round, stone, world. Even the A sounds. Small, large, alone. We're getting sort of a ooh, oh, ooh, huh. We're supposed to take this a little bit more calmly. A little bit more thought goes into this. May's picked up this smooth round stone. As small as a world. It contains an entire world. The smooth stone has an entire world inside it. And she's contemplating this. She's thinking about this, all the possibilities of this stone. It's an entire world of possibilities. At the same time, it's just her. She's not sharing this with anyone. She's alone with her stone. She likes to be alone with her thoughts. She's not social. So, this is just a fun poem. It's not intended to be super deep, but notice how he gets meaning in here. The ex-basketball player is one ginormous metaphor. It does not rhyme, so, and it barely uses meter. It's very close to free verse. It's set in the past. It's set in the 1940s. And it actually, if you think about Pleasantville, there's a lot of similarities here to Pleasantville. If you remember the scene in the schoolhouse, when in the classroom, I should say, when good old Mary Sue says, "Where does Main Street go?" And the teacher laughs, "Oh, you know the answer to that. The end of Main Street is just the beginning all over again. It doesn't go anywhere. All the streets go in a circle." Well, this is you're going to see in The Ex-Basketball Player by John Updike. Pearl Avenue runs past the high school lot, bends with the trolley tracks, and stops cut off before it has a chance to go 2 blocks. At Colonel McComsky Plaza, Bert's garage is on the corner facing west, and there most days you'll find Flick Webb, who helps Berth out. Flick stands tall among the idiot pumps, 5 on a side, the old bubblehead style, their rubber elbows hanging loose and low. One's nostrils are 2 S's, and his eyes are an E and an O. And one is squat without a head at all, more of a football type. Once, Flick played for the high school team, the Wizards. He was good, in fact, the best. In '46, he bucketed 390 points, a county record still. The ball loved Flick. I saw him rack up 38 or 40 in one home game. His hands were like wild birds. He never learned a trade. He just sells gas, checks oils, and changes flats. Once in a while as a gag, he dribbles an inner tube, but most of us remember anyway. His hands are fine and nervous on the lug wrench. Makes no difference to the lug wrench, though. Off work, he hangs around May's luncheonette. Grease-gray and kind of coiled, he plays pinball. Smokes those thin cigars, nurses lemon phosphates. Flick seldom says a word to May, just nods beyond her face towards bright applauding tiers of Necco wafers, nibs, and juju beads. Now, this could almost be written prose style, just like regular paragraphs. But he's put just enough work into it that it has a feel to it. It's not quite a very strong meter, but it's there. The main thing here, though, are the images. Pearl Avenue. When we look at the street, Pearl Avenue, it's a pearl, right? A pearl is a precious thing. So it should be doing something. We should be getting something out of it, but we don't. Because Pearl Avenue comes along, hits the high school, then bends with the trolley tracks, and then stops. Goes no further. It stops dead at McComsky's Plaza, where Bert's garage is. Pearl Avenue is a metaphor for Flick. He did really great. He was a real pearl when he was in high school playing basketball. He looked like he was going to do something with his life. He was going to be awesome. And then he got to the trolley tracks. Now the trolley tracks are train tracks. They could have taken him out of town, off to a great career somewhere. But instead, he turned away from the trolley tracks and went to Bert's garage, and that's where he's spending the rest of his life, fixing cars. What a waste of talent. He may not have made it, but he never even tried. He stands among the idiot pumps. And he's talking about these gas pumps. The old days, Esso is now known as Exxon. Not even sure we even have Exxon stations anymore. But that's what he's talking about here, is the old Esso stations. So the E, S's, and O's sort of makes like a face on the pump. He's saying that's it. This is Flick's audience. These are Flick's friends. These are the only people Flick works with. Are these idiot pumps. They just sit there. They don't do anything. They pump gas. They can't talk. They can't appreciate him. Then he goes on to tell us about how good Flick was back in high school. What a great basketball player he was. He even has this great simile at the end. His hands were like wild birds. But he never learned a trade. All he does is sell gas, checks oil, and changes flats. Which is pretty simple stuff. That was my first job. Pumping gas, checking oil, change a flat. I actually could do more than that. That's pretty sad. That's all he does? Really? That's pretty easy stuff. Once in a while he dribbles an inner tube just to make people remember that, yeah, he still has the skills. So what? He's not accomplishing anything with it. And this is the saddest part of all. When he's not working, he hangs around at May's luncheonette. He plays pinball. He smokes little teeny cigars. He drinks lemon sodas. He doesn't talk to anybody. He says occasional word to May, but not much. He just sits there playing his pinball, and who's his audience? Tiers or racks of Necco wafers, nibs, and juju beads. Now, if you've ever had any of this candy, they had better candy back in the day when this poem was written. Necco wafers are kind of like antacids. They're sugary, but they're also kind of pasty. They're okay, but they're nothing spectacular. Licorice nibs, black licorice nibs. They're not even the good cherry licorice or strawberry licorice. They're black licorice nibs. You're true, I'm true, I'm true. You get stuck in your teeth and they're Jujube is sort of the same way. You chew on them, they get stuck in your teeth. They're like really gooey gummy bears. They don't dissolve quickly. They stay in your mouth for a while. When I used to go to the movies when I was a kid, we could get jujubes. They were cheap. And you'd get them good and wet, and you'd throw them up, and they'd stick to the screen. You walk up down the aisle, and your feet would all get stuck to all the jujubes sitting out in the aisle, because nobody ate them. We threw them at each other. Yeah, what great candies for him, for his audience. No, he couldn't have M&M's or Snicker bars or Hershey bars. Hershey bars were around in the 40s. No, he has nibs and jujubes. Here's another example of an Edgar Allan Poe. I think we've kind of beat Poe to death. I'm going to skip that. I love this one by Stephen Crane. This shows you what he can do with how he arranges the line. This is one where you really have to have the poem centered. You don't want to have it lining up with the margin, because it kind of it gives a visual at the same time you're reading it. I saw a man pursuing the horizon. Round and round they sped. I was disturbed at this. I accosted the man. It is futile, I said. You can never... You lie, he cried and ran on. Notice what it's doing. Okay? What is the horizon? But it's that line in the far distance where the ground meets the sky. Can you ever reach it? No, because as you approach it, it moves and you see a little further on and a little further on, because Earth is round. You'll just keep going in a circle, keep going round and round. You'll never reach the end. If Earth was flat, sure, you'd reach the end eventually, but it's not. So, what the heck is he talking about? Nobody really chases the horizon, do they? Do they? What could he be meaning here? What does he mean by chasing the horizon? This poem was written right around the time of the Spanish-American War. Stephen Crane was a war correspondent, and he saw a lot of futility in his life. Things that, why are we bothering? Why are we doing this? It doesn't accomplish anything. And that's what he felt about war. He felt that war was futile. It doesn't accomplish anything except death. There were better ways to achieve the same goals, Crane thought. So you could look at it from that point of view. And you could look at it as the American dream. our personal dreams. Can we ever really achieve these dreams that we have? Can we reach that horizon? Some painful things to think about. Ozymandias. This one, written by Percy Bysshe Shelley, who, by the way, was the husband of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. Shoot, I can't get this thing to zoom in. At the time he wrote this, in 1818, remember, we'd had the Revolutionary War and America had broken free from the British Empire? Things weren't looking too good for Great Britain at the time. What a time for the dog to decide to bark. So, I can't pause this thing or I'll have to start it over. The British Empire at the time, the King George, used to brag about the fact that the sun never sets on the British Empire. I'm going to kill that dog. That literally at any time of the day, the sun was shining on some part of the world that the British controlled. There's somebody at my door. Mom's taking care of it. Sorry about that, folks. So literally, he was bragging about how great the British Empire was. I have the greatest empire in the world. My nation is fantastic. Well, he just lost the United States. And there was going to be more happening than that. So, this is a big deal. Shelley was trying to say, hey, George, wake up. Stop bragging about how great your country is and maybe do something to keep it great. Because the reason why the United States left is you were giving them no representation. You were overtaxing them. You're treating them like dirt. And you're doing the same to all these other countries that you control. Wake up, George, or you're going to lose this great kingdom. Think about these other great empires that preceded you. The Egyptian Empire, the Sumerian Empire, the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire. There have been dozens of empires, and they've all fallen. So, to try to emphasize this, Shelley writes this poem, Ozymandias. I met a traveler from an ancient land who said, 2 vast and trunkless legs of stone stand in the desert. Near them on the sand, half sunk, a shattered visage lies, whose frown and wrinkled lip and sneer of cold command. I'm going to have to stop this and kill the dog. Hold on, guys.